Yeah, and shout out to Alex. I believe he's not very well, so this will be recorded. I hope you get well soon, Alex. So yeah, we'll jump into this. So I'm going to let you guys introduce yourself, but we also have time for a very quick self-plug in the first question as well. So do you want to start from there?
Hello, I'm Alexander. I look after media rights at Blast, and that includes everything from TV to online to data to betting to theatrical.
I'm the founder and CEO of Hotdrop, creative marketing agency. I've had a decade in the space working at the likes of ESL as marketing director prior to making my own venture. We've got a wonderful team on the ground. So yeah, excited to talk on today's panel.
Hello, Claire Hungate, President and COO of Team Liquid. I've only worked in esports for 5 months, so take what I say with a pinch of salt. Prior to that, I spent 20 plus years working in TV production and social media, grew a group of TV production companies, sold it to Warner Brothers, so kind of creative industries, media, broadcasting is my background. Thank you.
Excellent. I'm Chris Kissack. I advise the Isle of Man government from an esports point of view, and I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I'm seeing lots of recognised faces as well. The first question I wanted to hit you with, I mean, anybody who follows the media and whether or not it's mainstream or within the industry, there are terms that get thrown around with regards to pivot. The esports industry has pivoted, or it's moved really well from a pandemic point of view. But what I wanted to ask you guys is what actually, from your areas of the business, was always part of the plan for the last year before we move on to what we've learned from. So what did you guys work on that maybe you had to bring forward from a timetable point of view, but were always actually in the roadmap to identify what you did this year? Do you want to start from yourself, from Blast?
Sure. So in terms of our distribution of footprint of where we are at the moment and where we were at the beginning of 2020, we're fairly well distributed. We have about 40 partners. We're in 150 TV territories. When we go online, there's 21 languages in terms of the productions. So for us, the plan at the beginning was pretty much to do what we do, which is look at territories where we're not, and go there. And what we found was that that was pretty much everything going according to plan. But if I look for 1 second at the linear side and I look at the TV channels that we engage with, you can broadly divide them into 4 parts. So sort of like commercial channels, general interest channels, ITV here or TV2 in Denmark. Then we have general sports channels, Fox Sports, The Zone, that kind of channel. Then there's some public broadcasters, interestingly. From the beginning, we've had RTP in Portugal, and there's others. And then there's bespoke esports channels. And for 3 out of the 4, everything was kind of like business as normal, except for that sport wasn't available. So they would still continue to program whatever entertainment programming they have, but there was no sports programming, which was a huge problem for one, which was the general sports channels. So suddenly we had a whole range of potential clients and existing clients that didn't have content, and they were looking for content. So the attention that we received from those partners and potential partners in our pitches was really phenomenal. And as a result of that, esports got overall a lot of attention, good attention. People were realizing that while other things are just simply coming to a halt, we're talking now March, April 2020, that here's a genre that just keeps going and going uninterrupted, doesn't even stutter. So as a result of that, we did quite a number of deals. We did a deal with the BBC, which brought us a lot of publicity and a lot of additional clients. So it's always hard when we're talking about that subject of 2020 to point out good things. It just feels almost inappropriate. But for us, certainly in the rollout of the media rights, that was a very successful time.
And from yourself, Heather, what did you look at from your client's point of view that was actually business as usual?
I'm the one with the cursed microphone, sorry. I think what was really great was that they were all, a lot of the brands we were working on and working closely with had internally started to discuss what can we do differently, and it just so happened to be like kind of January, February, March time, so it just felt like there wasn't a huge shift or change. I'm really sorry with this. And I think that gave us a lot of confidence to know that we could deliver, because when you were met with that, you're kind of like, okay, well, the world has really changed. But I think to what you were saying, it feels sometimes wrong to point out the positives of that year. But generally what we saw was a lot of this catalyst, really. We've been discussing for a few years what will be the breakthrough, what will make it mainstream, no one would have ever, and I'm sure no one ever said a pandemic, but things such as betting just went through the roof, and I'm sure they were all in their boardrooms kind of like, well, what do we do? Things are over for a period of time, but yet esports betting went through the roof, and general engagement and viewership therefore being placed and on linear and OTT platforms meant a huge just generic uplift, and things that benefited from that was sim racing as well, and so a huge influx of sponsorship just naturally shifted towards that. And I think ultimately the key takeaway from that was that we can live in this digital and physical world and activate audiences in ways that we've never thought about before, and it just really challenged us creatively, which we're really grateful for, to be honest. Now you're cursed. I'll pass the curse over.
From Team Liquid's point of view, with fan personas changing, and what strategies did you have? I know we spoke about it briefly, to engage with fans in a new method.
Yeah.
I've got a really loud voice. I can just shout. I don't know the rest of us.
Let's give this a go. Oh, there we go. That's better. So, other than tournament winnings and in-game digital items when tournaments were cancelled, that's where we noticed the downturn. But, obviously teams are driven by tribal fandom. Our audience is the most powerful and valuable asset we have, and we've done a lot of work in engaging our audience across multiple platforms. And so once you have that loyal, engaged audience and you have well-developed digital platforms, you can continue to monetize them and take advantage of the fact that that audience are now online. And so, we saw a big upturn we have a lot of big media streaming deals with Twitch and Hungate. So we have, over 110 players and creators streaming on Twitch, for instance. Those numbers went higher. Our Hungate numbers were higher. Our sponsorship revenue, luckily we have very long-term loyal sponsors with a highly engaged, loyal audience, ever more engaged. Those partnerships stay where they are, and I know in a lot of other digital publishers, lots of their sponsorships and partnerships were cancelled, and there was very little they could do about that. Apparel sales, we still noticed were high because, as I say, we got this highly engaged, put a great emphasis on building brand, building audience, tribal fandom, engaging audiences across platforms. And, once you have that really, really strong digital presence to monetize that in that situation, I guess, becomes easier.
Did we see with the brands looking at others? I think everyone was trying to learn from everyone at that period of time, because it really opened up a whole new dialogue, and everyone was generally interested in what the problem solving was going to be. Problem solving, I'm going to use the term problem solving, because it was all a bit frantic. I think we think about it, it was definitely an uplift, but we come to these events and we hear a lot about kind of digital platforms and generally a monetization of an audience that will have an experience. And I think that really was spearheaded, and I think that's given it validity. I think there was question marks around whether that was a viable commercial revenue stream for businesses. I don't think everyone's completely savvy at that yet, but I think what that gave us was a playground and a bit of a sandbox to work within. And because I just can't believe that we were working with brands and we've had this complete period of just experimenting because we just didn't know what was around the corner. And I don't think we'll get that in our industry for a long time. And so, yeah, I think the conversations and dialogues we've had it wasn't about the short-term touch points, but it was definitely like, we've still got a long-term vision, but how can we make the most of that now to benefit the long term, and how do we pivot our plans to still achieve our vision later down the line for revenue?
Just worth saying, sorry I didn't quite answer your question. I think what it's worth saying though is that none of that is easy in esports, because the esports audience, as Heather and I were discussing earlier, are particularly divided, because they are divided by game. So they are fans of particular games. Is there such a thing as an esports fan? Discuss. Or are you, a League of Legends fan, CSGO fan, whatever it is? So your audience is already divided. Team Liquid are in 15 different games, and so you have a highly divided audience. Traditionally, fans are fans of players rather than teams. And so as a team, how do you aggregate that audience, make them fans of your team rather than that particular player? And so one of the things we did is developed a fan engagement tool called Liquid Plus. And so in that kind of, great marketing pyramid of heart, mind, wallet, or whatever terminology you use, it kind of really works on the mind bit to get that loyalty from fans, giving them points and rewards for their engagement with your content, whether that content, whichever social platform that might be on, but taking them away from Google and Facebook, Meta, and bringing them into your own owned and operated platform where you truly own them, you own their data. They are your audience, because obviously on a social platform they are not your audience. You know so little about them.
Was that your, fairly new into the industry, was that one of the biggest learning curves, the diversification from so many different fans and the different models and personas? Is that one of the biggest challenges you found coming into the space?
Yeah, I didn't realise that at all, and the kind of narrative I put through my career from kind of TV to digital to esports is following the audience. So there's linear TV with, well, it's got an audience, but they're 60 years plus. Anyone under 30 is not watching linear TV anymore, to digital and social, where you have an audience, where you have reach, but you don't necessarily have engagement, to gaming, where you have the most highly engaged, loyal audience. An organic audience is the most valuable audience you can possibly own, because you have an audience that come back to your content day in, day out, and they're loyal to your brand. And so how do you diversify your revenue streams around that audience? And so, that's the kind of model I came in with. But it is a huge challenge. Okay, yes, you've got this audience, but they're all into completely different things. They're engaging on different platforms. How do you take the audience from your player that you might only have on contract for 2 years and bring them into your team to create that kind of those sustainable revenue lines?
I imagine Hotdrop's got a few presentation decks around that from an education point of view and educating new brands coming in.
Yeah, there's a duty of care, isn't there, with the industry, because you have to set the expectation in the right way, but you don't also want to deter. Sometimes I panic when I hear people say, you've got to do things perfect, and if you don't, then the audience is going to scream and shout at you, it's the Wild West, and I don't necessarily agree with that, because we need new thinkers to come into the space and give them the space and the air to think creatively from their experiences of non-esports backgrounds, and really help us elevate and take the industry to the next place. And sometimes I think, we could go down a one track, so we really have to catch ourselves with the way that we're doing and really explain that the possibilities are endless, and that if we can really have a great mind share and open dialogue such as today on what those revenue streams are, and I think we have to, as an industry, talk more about our learnings and admit, okay, we tried that, it didn't work well. Here's where we think it didn't work well, and really want to see success in that, because it was an idea and it was put to test because we believed in it. And so it is about trial and error, and I think we need to share more of that, and I think that's one of the beauties of the sector, is that we are quite, you could see, us talking about it, but I might know something about that. And I mean, we just share and build upon that. So yeah, I've probably not answered your question directly, but we do definitely take a very conscious approach. We don't want to deter thinking outside the box, because you've got to fit in the norm of our sector, because that's the way we've been doing it for so long.
Okay, so jumping on that from thinking outside the box, and from a tournament point of view, I mean, we've seen some amazing stadium-filled events over the past weekend and past weeks. What opportunities do you think they are moving into next year for smaller grassroots and smaller pop-up events? Yes, it'll be great to get back from a LAN point of view and fill these big stadiums, but what opportunities do you see from a tier 2, tier 3 and smaller events, both from a TO point of view but also from an activation point of view, and what can we take from this year moving into next year?
Sure. If I may, because we're talking about revenue streams, I'll start with sponsorship revenue and come to tier 2 tournaments, if I manage to do that bridge. Because one of the things, unlike media rights that I've mentioned before, what wasn't that easy was for the sponsorship team and the brand integration to have a seamless path from pre-COVID to COVID, because suddenly you didn't have any physical space for brand integrations, for fans activities, all of that. And we needed to start thinking about how do we entertain people online. We needed to start thinking, how do we redefine online entertainment in a way that it hasn't been done before, by integrating the audience, so when you're watching that you feel you're part of something and you're not just alone. It's much easier when you show a full arena, full stadium, and you know there's a crowd there. And we've just seen on the weekend how amazing that feels when that happens. So going forward into 2022, we're really excited that that's coming back, and we've just announced 8 sponsors for our fall final, which is later in this month in Copenhagen. And the question then is, when these big arena events are coming back, to what degree do we have a space for tier 2 and tier 3 events? And for us as Blast, one of the things that was possible also when we realized, now going back to 2020, that certain content wasn't available anymore, we realized it's not just a question of new clients with what we already have, but there may be an opportunity in providing something that we didn't think about before. So we created a tournament series which is called Blast Rising, which is exactly a tier 2 tournament series dedicated to teams that normally don't make it into sort of like our Champions League approach of the very, very best teams in the world. And we started that last year, and we're continuing this year. We're going to have the next one coming up just in a couple of weeks, and then that's something that we will see next year as a franchise going forward. And I think if I look at what other colleagues and organizations have done, for example, what Grid did with Home Sweet Home, that's precisely that kind of tournament that fills a gap, and the benefit of that gives teams that previously didn't have the chance and didn't think that they would have the chance to take center stage for a moment, and if they shine, maybe go up, that there's a sort of like a pathway. And in that regard, I think the development has been very, very positive, and we're excited to be part of it. As a company, we've also introduced global qualifiers. So this year, we started last year, we tested in a few regions, we saw there was demand, we saw that was successful, there was viewership. So this year we had 16 qualifiers, almost reaching the entirety of the world, which meant that there were hundreds of teams from somewhere in Finland to Malaysia to Argentina to all over the world, who had really a credible chance and a credible pathway to a Blast Showdown, to a Blast Final, to the World Final. So we're doing that as a company, but we also very much like to see that others are doing it.
What about from a tier 1 and top tier org? How important is it that from your side or your strategy to encourage grassroots or academy teams, not just from within the org, but from the wider ecosystem?
You know, as Heather was saying earlier, it's absolutely essential that teams and the industry are working together to grow the industry as a whole. In isolation, Team Liquid mean nothing. We are part of a bigger ecosystem, and it's in all our interests to grow that ecosystem. So, absolutely. It's also part of that, deep fan engagement. One of the things, the events we hold are ourselves are kind of broken into events that satisfy partnerships, fan engagement events that we either do in person or digitally, some of which we do on Liquid Plus. If you get to a certain level on Liquid Plus, then you get access to private events, but also diversity, equity and inclusion. We've been actually during the COVID times quite a lot of engagement with our audience around pride, around accessibility, women's events, etc. So these are all ways of engaging our audience in a much deeper way that isn't just about reach, because Team Liquid's brand isn't necessarily just about we're massive, we've got the biggest audience in the world. That's not necessarily important to us. That's not what we stand for. We're about mastery, winning, everyone is welcome. And so that kind of deep engagement that we get through smaller events is important to us.
And do you think the industry is coming together as an industry, or orgs come together as industry to be supportive for each other on that sort of focused mission? Do you think we can do better on that side of things?
On diversity particularly? Yes. Yeah. Well, I just sat and watched a panel where there were 4 men speaking and 1 female moderator, so yes.
Good point. Heather?
Amen. I think it's really about time now, as in not like we need more time. We've had our time. Generally everyone needs to step their game up. It's not easy. Even just as a business owner, hiring talent, you really have to go beyond just the application. You really have to dig around and really find the talent that is coming up and representing the industry correctly. And that's something, content is really key. And I think original content is going to start to open the door in a natural, organic way where diversity is just not even, the purpose or the reason for doing something, which sometimes it can be. And we see that in sport as well. In sport, I remember a few years ago, I was at a sports award, and this people from women's football were saying, wow, esports is doing much better diversity inclusion than sports has been doing for the past 100 years. And and I was like, really? Are we? I'm not sure. I think, and it's a key thing naturally, because everyone in the world wants to and should be more diverse in their workspaces and what they bring to the table. And that is a big focus for brands. But how do we do that in the right way that isn't just appeasing the boardroom? Do you know what I mean? And that's a challenge.
Without it looking manufactured.
Yeah, and that's not what we stand for. We don't want to be serving tick boxes, and so it has to be done right. I don't have the right answer.
No, and also there isn't kind of agreement, is there, within the industry? And I don't have all the answers. And Marie sitting down here that's a big part of the work she does around women in esports. But there isn't agreement yet. Should we have women's teams, or should women be fielded as part of a mixed roster? There isn't agreement on that. Does that disagreement hold us back? Maybe it does slightly. Maybe people are scared to make that investment because they're not sure what the reaction might be from the community if they were to do something that community doesn't like. Because let's face it, this is a industry that is very much driven by that community and that audience reaction.
And one school of thought is, and I've had conversations just today on that, is it could potentially be a stepping stone to create that safe space. It's not just going to be this is for, and eventually we can move that and stepping face forward. I mean, I know we're going off track, but I think it's a really important conversation to have. And I'm going to throw it out to the audience. Any questions on that, or we can move back on a bit of a focus from a revenue point of view.
We noticed actually that a very high percentage of our superfans, so we have this incredible data from Liquid Plus, a very high percentage of our superfans, and the superfans are the ones who are, spending hundreds of dollars a year on Team Liquid, apparel, commerce, whatever it is, are women. Very highly engaged audience.
And we're seeing that trend across in-game purchases and DLC, and generally, I would say apparel, mainly because we've been so starved of female-fitting apparel for so long. Finally, I remember at ESL asking for a woman's fit T-shirt for an event. It was unheard of. And it was just want something that doesn't make me look like a box. That'd be great, thanks. But no, seriously, there is a huge uplift in-game purchases. From a woman's kind of buyership and non-binary, but generally an uplift in events and participation events and attendance. And we're starting to see a split. I remember when we were doing events at ESL, and particularly in the UK market, for about 3 years, we were an audience of 94% male. And it was like, how do we change that and get more diversity at events and physical? So the offering and general experiences are being uplifted by women first, more as an early adopter in that. So yeah, it's a whole different panel, I think, in terms of talking about brands marketing in a way. When Molly, marketing manager at Hotdrop, we were discussing this morning the Revolution makeup paid advertisement of Gamer Girl, and we're so past that, and we're kind of like, why are we getting given that ad? Like, if you'd done it in a way that was a creative cosplay, makeup tutorial using that makeup, perhaps I would be interested, but it's just also, again, that's not inclusive, because it's like, who are they marketing? It's like, because you're a woman in the UK, it was like, well, everyone else loves makeup as well. Why can't they love gaming and makeup? So yeah, I mean, it's a question, and I think we need to talk about it more openly. I admittedly am a bit nervous answering and talking about on stage, and I shouldn't be. I think I need to do some more soul searching on it, but it's an interesting time, and I think we're watching closely on what those buying and purchasing habits are a lot more to really understand and harness it for AR brands, but also for us as people of the industry and community ourselves.
And do you think, you talk about the superfans and that superfans model, I mean, that's really valuable information. Do you think the industry, other than attending events like this, is being educated enough on that? Is there more room from an education, from speaking to whether or not its partners approaching somebody like Hotdrop or new brands looking to get into the space? Is the industry being educated enough? Room.
I don't actually, for the first time on a panel, have an answer for that. I like to think we're doing a really good job. I mean, we're a women-led business, so first of all, that's a lot of education, because they don't typically, our first engagement with a brand is navigating the concept of a woman-led business, and that's of no harm of their own, but that might be a systemic, structural place, and they're seeing something else, and that's new to navigate. So we help them navigate, first of all, what it's like to work with a women-led business, and then from there, it's really getting down and keeping all options open and having an open mind, and just embracing it and having fun in the industry. And I know we say, like, oh, you've got to do things right, and I've just called out a particular brand, but you do have to question sometimes what are they being told. And I think you have to let conversations breathe and let people draw their own conclusions and their own decisions about things, and let them do some research. We always say, please go talk to, here's our competitors, please go talk to them as well. Please hear what they've got to say on the sector or the industry if you're thinking about delving in and taking this seriously. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really have an answer for that. I know I've just spoken for 2 minutes, but yeah.
Throwing questions out then for the last sort of 5 minutes. Has anybody got any questions for the panel?
So a few things. So you've just had the panel before with NFTs. I think there was a huge uplift in that, and I think we'll continue, this industry in particular will continue on shaping what an NFT looks like for a fan experience. The biggest thing for us that we've seen is we work a lot with a lot of TOs, but it's now more about the pre and post event revenue outside of a tournament. So it's also getting into stadiums and the media rights, and we're still really harnessing that as a sector. but it's really about what is those experiences and how can we monetize them, what's the value add to the sponsor, because it's now the same budgets at the moment, but we have to proof out the concept. So I think a lot of brands and a lot of teams and a lot of tournament organizers right now are proving out the concept that for a slightly increased budget and an upsell, we can generate these user experiences that aren't NFT. So I've just flown onto a different thing. But is it, and it's not a gamification in a way, but it's another value add. Do they get an exclusive into a digital event that is the pre-hype to a viewing party in the physical place? And really what does that post-event happen? Because there's so many events in the calendar cycle that you can move on to the next CSGO major or Dota 2, the TI and Worlds were on at the same time. Well, how do you get your lion's share of that revenue? So proving out concepts with brands that whole customer journey from January to December and rinse and repeat, is that a physical or digital attendance? Hopefully might tee you up nicely.
Yeah. I agree with everything you just said. Plus, it might not be reinventing the wheel, but the return to LAN is a huge thing. So if you think about revenue, we've maximized now the revenue in terms of the media rights. It's clear where that is going, and the question now is, how do we maximize the return to LAN? There's a hunger for appearance, which we've never seen before. It comes from a variety of directions. It's either broadcast partners who are asking us to come to places. It is local language partners and licensees who says, I could do an event in Moscow, I could do one in Beijing, I could do one in Budapest. So we have literally at the moment conversations that I think are more than 10 potential locations. At the same time, local government, there's a market for events. And esports is the hottest thing in town. It's sexier to bring esports to Barcelona than a photo exhibition in the thinking of most people, including local politicians. So we have a great degree of interest in bringing events. Now, in terms of bringing them to revenue then, of course you have the potential of a license fee if there's sufficient interest, but then you have a return of finally ticketing revenue. You're selling a physical ticket. Somebody will take a seat. Merchandise is always possible, but of course, when your fans are in arena, the incentive to buy and the wish to be part of it by consuming what is on offer, same for food and beverage, of course, is pretty big. So from our point of view, the return to LAN and then the question also, where do you go, is one that's really interesting. The second point that in our thinking is quite relevant is we think when we think of esports, we're thinking constantly, how can we grow it? How can we go wider to the mainstream? The endemic crowd is very much in favor of what we're doing collectively, not just us. But how can that go wider? And one of the easiest ways of making something available is coming to town. So for us, when we think not just about what are we doing in 2022, but how do we grow our brand? How do we become, a global player in 2023, 2024? We're certainly thinking about those locations that we want to visit. So to come back to your question in terms of revenue stream, this is something that is really important for us in the short run for 2022, but also hopefully that plants the seed for more audience and additional revenue opportunities going forward on the base of these travels.
Just on that, on ticketing in particular, I think we've got a chance to rewrite history because it was such a standard way of doing ticketing for a stadium event. So, when we were doing ESL 1 Birmingham, there was such a rigid structure that we do because that had been applied. But now you're seeing kind of an ability to remotely monetize an audience as they're passing through with footfall and becoming far more savvy about that. So, contactless bands, that's now a thing because we've got this sudden uplift of QR codes and contactless payments we need to start harnessing that and actually applying to that. And that's actually one of the challenging focuses right now is actually, oh yes, we've got people, we've got boots on the ground, how do we now enhance it? And I think the best way to capitalise that right now is the fans are saying yes and they want more, they want it to be really special when they come to an event, and they've got that purse. We know an esports fan has a disposable income, we know the demographics. If you don't, let's talk about that. But you know, they have the money to spend, and they are so passionate that they're going to do it, but they need to know that that was the value add. So yes, how do we get a customer that is purchasing a ticket through a stadium event that is generally going to have an experience that's paid for, but they can choose to touch in at different times, just in case their friends can't join, they can still have a good experience as well. So these are the things that we're looking at when we're coming into physical events, of driving that value add for both the brand and the fan, but also, again, I know in the NFT panel saying, you know, don't make this a superior thing. There has to be levels to it. I think that's I guess the business plan to it all right now, is valuing that and what those prices will be, particularly in a stadium, which is really exciting, having been hell-bent to certain types of ticketing, and it's educating ticketing platforms as well, just on the ticketing side, so I'm quite passionate about it, but yeah.
From an org's point of view, is there anything to add from that?
Diversify. You know, it's no secret that, you know, most teams are heavily dependent on sponsorship revenue. Team, you know, you're part sports team, part digital publisher. We need to diversify revenue streams, and we do that by really building on fan engagement, and it will all be, you know, as these guys are saying, about direct to consumer, owning your audience, engaging your audience, and going direct to consumer.